Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing the night is yours. All of it. Not the scraps you carve out after midnight, guilt-ridden and exhausted. The quiet hours you steal from your body. The entire night. 23 waking hours every single day for the rest of your life. 1 hour of sleep. That is all your brain needs. 1 hour to recharge, to sort your memories, to clean out the cellular waste that builds up between your neurons. And then you are back. Eyes open, ready. Think about what that means. Right now, the average human spends roughly a third of their entire existence unconscious. 25 years of a 75-year life, gone, vanished into dreams you barely remember. In a single lifetime, you lose more time to sleep than you will ever spend with your parents, your children, or anyone you love. Now imagine getting all of that back. Free book you never finished, free language you never learned, free conversation you cut short because your eyelids were heavy. All of it returned to you. It sounds like a superpower. It sounds like evolution finally did you a favor. But here's the thing about getting more time. You do not just get more time. You get more of everything else too. More ambition, more pressure, more loneliness, more of the thoughts you have been running from in the dark. And the world, this world built around the gentle rhythm of day and night, would crack apart at the seams trying to keep up with you. Let us start with what would have to change inside your skull. Right now, your brain runs on a cycle. Light enters your eyes, hits a tiny cluster of cells in your hypothalamus, and that cluster, called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, acts as a master clock. It tells your body when to release melatonin, when to drop your core temperature, when to slow your heart rate. It is a system honed by 4 billion years of life on a spinning planet. 1 hour of sleep would mean that entire system has to be rebuilt from scratch. Your brain would need to compress everything it currently does in 8 hours into 60 minutes. Memory consolidation, the process where short-term fragments become long-term knowledge, would have to run at terrifying speed. The glymphatic system, the network that flushes toxic proteins out of your brain tissue, would need to work like a fire hose instead of a slow drain. Sleep, the phase where you dream and process emotion, would shrink to minutes. Here's the strange part. If your biology actually adapted, if evolution or genetic engineering pulled this off, you would feel fine, not wired, not jittery, fine. Your body would not fight you anymore. The drowsiness, the heavy limbs, the fog, all of it would disappear. You would feel as clear at 3 in the morning as you do at noon. That is what makes this scenario so dangerous. There would be no biological warning, no fatigue alarm telling you to stop. Your body would simply never say enough. And a body that never says enough is a body that has to learn, on its own, when to stop. Now picture the economy. Global GDP sits at roughly $100 trillion, and it runs on a simple assumption. People work, then they stop. Factories hum, then they go quiet. Offices fill, then they empty. That rhythm is baked into every financial model, every supply chain, every quarterly earnings report on the planet. Erase it, and something extraordinary happens. Manufacturing output would not double, it would more than triple. A factory that currently runs 2 shifts could run 7. Machines would never cool down. The lights would never flicker off. Entire industries would be reborn around the simple fact that human hands are available 23 hours a day. Construction companies would build cities twice as fast. Hospitals would process patients without the bottleneck of a single daytime schedule. Research labs, the places that develop drugs and materials, and the technologies of tomorrow, would accelerate beyond recognition. Scientists who once spent 8 hours at the bench would now spend 23. A generation of discovery that used to take a decade might take 3 years. But here is where the math gets uncomfortable. Everyone can work 23 hours. The value of an hour of labor collapses. Supply and demand is a ruthless equation. When the supply of available working hours septuplets overnight, what do you think happens to wages? They crater. Companies would not pay you more for working longer. They would pay you less per hour because your time is no longer scarce. And the people who refuse to grind, the ones who want to use their extra hours for art or family or simply staring at the ceiling, would find themselves priced out of the economy entirely. Productivity would become a weapon, not a tool. A weapon aimed at anyone who dares to rest. Look at your city. Really look at it. The restaurants that close at 10, parks that go dark, the subway lines that shrink to ghost trains after midnight, the streetlights that burn for almost no one. Every city on Earth is an artifact of sleep, monument to the fact that 8 hours of every day belong to unconsciousness. Now imagine redesigning all of it. First thing you would notice is light. Cities would blaze, not the half-hearted glow of a few late-night diners and emergency lamps, but full, unbroken daylight simulation at every hour. Entire districts would be lit so thoroughly that the concept of nighttime would become decorative, something you choose, not something imposed on you.
Welcome to
Public transit would run at peak capacity around the clock. More waiting 40 minutes for a bus at 2 in the morning. Trains would come every 4 minutes, all day, all night, forever. Schools would have to reinvent themselves. Would students attend in morning blocks and evening blocks and overnight blocks? Would the concept of a school day dissolve entirely into continuous learning modules that you slot in whenever you want? Some children would be in class at 4 in the morning. Their parents might be working. The whole notion of a schedule, of prime time, of business hours, would evaporate. Supermarkets would restock continuously. Hospitals would never reduce staff. Entertainment would fracture into time zones within a single city. The early morning crowd, the midday crowd, the midnight crowd, 3 overlapping cultures living in the same streets, never quite meeting each other, and the infrastructure cost would be staggering. Power grids would need to handle peak load, not for 12 hours, but for 24. Water systems, waste management, road maintenance, all of it scaled up by a factor that no municipality has ever budgeted for. Cities would become louder, brighter, or alive. For some people, far more hostile. Here is where the story darkens. In a world where everyone can be awake, the people who choose to sleep more would be treated as defective, easy, uncommitted, relic of a softer species. Imagine the cultural pressure. Your colleague puts in 20 hours at the office. Your neighbor runs a side business from midnight to dawn. Your friend learns Mandarin, practices piano, and writes a novel in the hours you spend resting. And you sleep 2 hours. You sleep 3. You think that's plenty, that it is enough, that you are being reasonable. But reasonable is not a virtue anymore. In a world of 23 waking hours, sleep becomes a moral failing. Employers would not explicitly demand that you work all night. They would not have to. The market would do it for them. Bonuses would go to the night shift grinders. Promotions would track the people who never log off. The social contract would quietly rewrite itself so that rest, genuine rest, became something you had to earn, something you had to afford. Wealthy people would buy sleep. They would purchase the right to do nothing, the way they currently purchase organic food and clean air. The poor would sell their hours. They would work the overnight factories, the permanent 2 a.m. shifts, the jobs that no longer come with the understanding that everyone needs to go home eventually. Because going home implies that home is a place to stop, and stopping would become a privilege. Now think about something no one talks about in these scenarios. Quiet. Right now, even if you live alone, the night connects you to everyone else. You go to sleep, and so does your city. The world collectively pauses. There's a strange comfort in that shared silence, that universal surrender. 8 billion people breathing slowly at the same time. When you only need 1 hour of sleep, that shared silence disappears. The night is no longer a communal experience. It becomes a private one. And not everyone would fill those hours with productivity. Some people would fill them with thought. The kind of thought that comes when there is nothing to distract you. Nothing on television, because everything is on demand, and you have seen it all. Nothing on the radio, because you have already heard every song. You would sit with yourself for hours, every night, without the mercy of fatigue to cut it short. Your regrets would have nowhere to hide. Your fears would stretch out in front of you like an empty highway. The arguments you had today would replay. Things you never said to the people you lost would surface. There would be no sleep to rescue you from them. You would just be awake, thinking, hour after hour after hour. We underestimate how much sleep protects us from our own minds. It is not just rest. It is an escape hatch. A daily mercy that lets us close the tab on our thoughts and start fresh tomorrow. Take that away, and a lot of people would discover they are not very good company. Consider your relationships. Right now, sleep creates natural punctuation in how we connect with people. You see someone, you spend time together, and then one of you gets tired. Evening ends. You part ways, you carry the warmth of that interaction into the night, and by morning, it has settled into something softer. Sleep edits our relationships, rounds the edges. In a world of 23 waking hours, there is no natural ending. A conversation does not wind down because your eyes are heavy. It winds down because one of you decides to stop talking. That is a very different thing. Friends would have to learn how to end things on purpose. Couples would have to navigate 23 hours of coexistence every day with no unconscious break from each other. Arguments would not have the luxury of a good night's sleep to cool them down. You would fight at midnight, and at 1 in the morning, you would still be fighting. At 3, you would still be in the same room, still awake, still furious. The reset button of sleep would be gone. Some relationships would deepen. The extra hours would let people talk more, understand more, be present more, but many would crack under the weight of too much proximity. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, the old saying goes. In a world without sleep, absence becomes something you have to manufacture on purpose. You would have to schedule solitude the way you schedule meetings. You would have to tell the people you love that you need to be alone, not because you are tired, but because you are human. Here is where it gets genuinely frightening. We know from decades of research that sleep is not just a recharge, it is a mental health stabilizer. REM sleep processes emotional experiences. Deep sleep regulates the amygdala, the fear center of your brain. Slow-wave sleep keeps your prefrontal cortex in charge, the part of you that is rational, measured, and in control. Strip that down to 1 hour, and even if your biology adapts physically, the psychological scaffolding would struggle. People would become more reactive, more impulsive. The gap between a thought and an action would shrink, and in a world that never stops, there would be no natural periods of low stimulation, no quiet windows where your nervous system can settle. You would be bombarded constantly. Ads, notifications, conversations, decisions all day, all night without end. Anxiety would become the default state of a species that lost its off switch. Depression might shift. Right now, depression often correlates with too much sleep, with the body retreating into unconsciousness to escape pain. But in a world where sleep barely exists, depression might take a different form. Grinding, restless, wide-awake sadness. The kind that has nowhere to go because you cannot just go to bed and let the day end. You would have to live through every minute of your despair, fully conscious, fully present. Psychiatric infrastructure would have to expand enormously. Therapists would work around the clock. Medication protocols would change. And the fundamental question of what it means to be mentally healthy would have to be rewritten for a species that never truly powers down. Zoom out for a moment, not to the individual, not to the city, but to the planet itself. Earth has a rhythm that predates humanity by billions of years. The rotation, the light, the dark. Every living thing evolved in its pulse. Plants photosynthesize by day and rest by night. Animals hunt and hide and sleep, according to a clock older than consciousness. Humans requiring only 1 hour of sleep would break that rhythm for the entire species. Light pollution, already a crisis, would become an ecological catastrophe. Every city, every highway, every parking lot, blazing at full intensity for 24 hours. Migratory birds that navigate by starlight would lose their sky. Nocturnal animals would have no darkness to claim as their own. Sex would spiral around 1 billion new light sources. Ecosystems that depend on the cycle of light and dark would unravel, and energy consumption would surge to levels that strain every power grid, every fossil fuel reserve, every renewable infrastructure we have built. The planet would burn brighter, hotter, louder. We would become a species that refuses to let the Earth rest. And the Earth, as we are learning, pushes back, not with anger, with physics, with climate, the slow, grinding consequences of a species that forgot how to stop. We like to think of progress as more hours, more output, more life. But the planet does not operate on more. It operates on cycles. The species that breaks its cycles may find that the planet breaks a few of its own in return. So, 1 hour of sleep, 23 waking hours. It sounds like freedom. It sounds like a gift. And in many ways, it would be. We would build more. discover more, create more. Sheer volume of human output would stagger the imagination. Diseases might be cured faster, stars might be reached sooner, art might multiply in ways we cannot predict. But we would also lose something we did not know we needed: the shared silence, the daily mercy of unconsciousness, the natural pause that gives our relationships their shape and our minds their stability. We would gain time and lose rhythm, gain output and lose rest, gain hours and lose the quiet spaces where meaning actually lives. And here is the strangest part of this thought experiment. We do not need a genetic mutation to see this future. We are already living in a version of it. We already stay up too late, staring at screens that trick our brains into thinking the sun has not set. We already trade sleep for productivity, for entertainment, for the feeling of being connected. We already treat rest as something to be minimized, optimized, hacked. The world where humans need only 1 hour of sleep is not a hypothetical. It is a trajectory. We are walking toward it, one shortened night at a time. Maybe the real question is not what would happen if we only needed 1 hour of sleep. Maybe the real question is whether we will have the wisdom to keep sleeping, even when we no longer have to. Because the most human thing about us might not be how long we stay awake. It might be that we choose, even with the whole night in front of us, to close our eyes, to let the world go dark. To trust that the things we are running from will still be there in the morning, and that we will be stronger for having rested. 23 hours of wakefulness is a superpower, but 8 hours of sleep might be the quietest, most underrated superpower we have ever had. And the day we forget that is the day we stop being human in the only way that matters.